Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because you want to go beyond the surface to really grasp complex topics and, have those aha moments
Yeah.
without feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, totally.
Today, we're tackling a question that might have crossed your mind. Why would someone actively refuse a simple request to use a particular name or pronoun?
And it's a question that it takes us to some pretty surprising places. We're not looking at this as just like a personal failing or a simple misunderstanding.
Right.
Instead, drawing from Dr. Jaime Hoerricks' really compelling essay, Episode 201, Neuroqueering the Language of Control. We'll uncover how this seemingly small act can actually be traced back to deeply ingrained theological frameworks and even the legacy of colonialism, insights you might not expect at all.
Exactly. Dr. Hoerricks' work really resonated with us. It suggests that this act of misgendering isn't just, an individual annoyance. It can be understood as a system of belief upheld by language itself and potentially challenged by this idea of neuroqueering. So our mission today is to dig into the structural roots of this refusal, to try and see the bigger picture. Okay, let's unpack this. Dr. Hoerricks starts by looking at the immediate impact of misgendering. And it's more than just words. Right?
It absolutely is. Interestingly, Dr. Hoerricks emphasizes what they call the somatics of erasure. That's the body's reaction, that physical feeling of being unseen,
Somatics, like in your body.
Exactly. They vividly describe the immediate physical and emotional responses, like a tightening in the jaw, maybe clenching your hand, your shoulders rising up. It's a really visceral reaction, almost like a sudden jarring noise really close to you.
Yeah.
Dr. Hoerricks frames it not as a simple error, but as a rupture, something that fundamentally disrupts the individual's sense of self right there in that moment.
And it's not just a one-off thing, is it? Dr. Hoerricks talks about the impact of repetition, this daily abrasion of being constantly misnamed or referred to incorrectly.
Yes.
It's the insistence that carries the real weight, isn't it?
That's it. The insistence.
It's like being told over and over again that your reality just isn't valid.
Precisely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Dr. Hoerricks highlights the erasure that often follows. You correct someone, you offer your name or pronouns, and then it's like you haven't spoken at all. They just continue as if your self-correction never even happened. This leads to a really profound feeling of invisibility, a sense that the basic social contract, acknowledging each other's reality, has just been broken.
That feeling of invisibility must be incredibly difficult. And Dr. Hoerricks brings in another layer here, connecting this to the experience of autistic individuals, particularly Gestalt language processors. Now, this gets really interesting when we consider how different people process language. What's unique about Gestalt language processing in this context?
Okay, so a key aspect here is that for some autistic individuals, misgendering can feel like a neurological disruption. Dr. Hoerricks describes it as an interruption in their internal script, almost like a short-circuiting that can scatter thoughts and cause a real loss of grounding. So it's not just a social hurt. It can be a deeply destabilizing experience on a neurological level for some people.
Wow, that adds a whole other dimension to it. And then there's the internal struggle that follows, that questioning of your own reality. Dr. Hoerricks talks about internalized gaslighting.
Yes, this raises such an important question about the insidious nature of repeated misgendering. Dr. Hoerricks points out that after experiencing this repeatedly, an internal voice starts to question your own perceptions. Was it really that bad? Am I just overreacting?
Right, you start doubting yourself.
Exactly. This voice, which might have initially been external, becomes internalized, making you doubt your own feelings and experiences. It's almost a form of self-surveillance, questioning not just what happened, but whether you're even allowed to feel the impact of it.
It sounds absolutely exhausting. And to add insult to injury, there's this societal expectation of enforced graciousness, as Dr. Hoerricks puts it.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture of social dynamics, marginalized individuals are often expected to, minimize their reactions to make others comfortable.
Yeah, don't make waves.
Right. Dr. Hoerricks argues that this expectation actually perpetuates the gaslighting system. It places the burden on the harmed individual to manage the discomfort of the person causing the harm. It's essentially a way of silencing the impact and protecting the status quo.
So after experiencing this harm and the subsequent self-doubt, Dr. Hoerricks talks about the process of reaching out, of researching others' experiences. It's about finding solidarity, right? Finding you're not alone.
Yes. Interestingly, Dr. Hoerricks describes seeking resonance with others. They talk about using online platforms almost as, portals to find people who have lived through similar experiences. It's about finding validation and a shared understanding that helps lift that fog of self-doubt.
And this isn't just anecdotal, feeling-based stuff. Dr. Hoerricks approaches this with a researcher's mindset, even coming with their own wound, as they put it, which is quite a powerful image.
Precisely. The research approach is described as deeply immersive and intentional, using academic databases, looking for patterns, even trying to stress test their own findings, checking the null hypothesis.
Right. Rigorous.
And a key finding emerges from this research. The refusal to use correct names and pronouns isn't random. It's structured, it's repeated, and importantly, it's taught.
That idea of it being taught is really significant, and Dr. Hoerricks points to systemic factors that uphold this.
Yeah, what's crucial to understand here is the role of systemic binary gender norms. Like, other research highlights how these norms are deeply embedded in our cultural and institutional structures. Think healthcare forms, government records, all that stuff. The system often just defaults to a binary understanding of gender, which can make it harder to recognize and validate trans and non-binary identities in the first place.
And sometimes it's not just a passive upholding of these norms, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Hoerricks mentions designedly intentional misgendering.
Yes, drawing on other researchers' work, Dr. Hoerricks introduces this concept of misgendering used deliberately as a tool for marginalization and discrediting. It's not a mistake in those cases. It's a form of asserting power, basically saying, your self-definition doesn't matter to me.
Wow, so it's actually weaponized sometimes.
It seems so. And linguistic studies apparently back this up, showing that it often goes hand in hand with other forms of harmful language.
Makes sense.
Yeah, other linguistic studies show that misgendering frequently co-occurs with other forms of verbal aggression and transphobic rhetoric, particularly in, well, online spaces, as you might expect. It's rarely just an isolated incident.
Of course, Dr. Hoerricks does acknowledge that unintentional misgendering happens too, maybe due to lack of information or systemic support. And you mentioned multilingual contexts.
That's an important nuance, definitely. Other research points to institutional failures in providing adequate tools and training, and some work highlights the linguistic complexities in multilingual settings. It can get complicated. Dr. Hoerricks holds space for these nuances, but importantly, emphasizes that unintentional harm is still harm. And the refusal to correct after being asked, that's where it crosses a really significant line.
Because ultimately, as Dr. Hoerricks argues, it often comes down to belief, this moral contestation that other researchers talk about.
Yes, this is the deeper ideological resistance. In these cases, misgendering isn't just an error. It's an act of enforcement rooted in the belief that trans identities are somehow illegitimate. It's a refusal to participate in what the speaker sees as a fundamental falsehood.
So we start to see these patterns emerge, this refusal operating almost as a doctrine. It's not about simpleness at all in those cases.
Precisely. Repeated misgendering, especially after correction, moves beyond error and functions as a statement of belief and, frankly, a means of control. It reveals a worldview where gender is seen as fixed, assigned by others, and something to be policed.
And Dr. Hoerricks argues this is a performance of dominance, a way of disciplining not just the individual being misgendered, but also signaling to others around them.
Exactly. It undermines the target's epistemic right, their right to define their own understanding of themselves, sending a clear message. I know what you really are, and your own understanding of yourself is irrelevant. It's about asserting authority and enforcing conformity.
Wow, this is getting really interesting. Dr. Hoerricks connects this insistence on fixed identity to theological structures, specifically Calvinism. That's a connection I never would have made. So this seemingly modern issue has roots in centuries-old theological thinking.
Indeed. It's quite a link, isn't it? Dr. Hoerricks argues that Calvinism, with its heavy emphasis on strict binaries, saved or damned, male or female, has deeply shaped Western notions of order and identity.
Huh. The binary thing.
Yeah, think of the strict binary of saved or damned in Calvinist theology. This same rigid either thinking can be applied to gender, where anything outside the male-female binary is seen as inherently wrong or disordered. In this kind of framework, everything has its prescribed place, and gender becomes a moral category where deviation is seen not just as different, but as a sin.
So, refusing to use someone's pronouns or dead-naming them, it can be seen as more than just impolite or ignorant. It's almost a reenactment of this theology.
Exactly. It's not just about language. It's about enforcing submission to these prescribed categories. Dr. Hoerricks frames it as a form of ritual punishment, maybe disguised as a misunderstanding, but functioning as a kind of secular continuation of spiritual discipline.
Ritual punishment. Wow. And this isn't just a historical influence lingering in the background. Dr. Hoerricks points to the impact of colonialism in actively spreading this binary system.
Yes, what's crucial to understand is how colonial projects often brought this binary understanding of gender with them, not just through religious doctrine, but through language itself. Many indigenous cultures had much more expansive gender systems reflected in their languages.
Right, I've heard about that.
Colonial education and administration actively suppressed these systems, often violently, forcing a binary framework and contributing to the erasure of indigenous languages and identities along the way.
So English and other colonial languages continue to carry this legacy, acting as tools of classification and even surveillance that often demand a fixed binary gender.
Precisely. Think about our documents, our systems, even our digital spaces online. They often require us to define ourselves within a narrow binary. Dr. Hoerricks argues this isn't neutral design. It's a continuation of a project rooted in the belief that certain truth must be overwritten for order to prevail.
This brings us to the final part of Dr. Hoerricks' essay, Writing Toward Understanding and Creating Alternatives, where they talk about language as a living act, moving toward solutions, perhaps.
Yes, after tracing these really deep systemic patterns, Dr. Hoerricks shifts focus to the power of resistance and the potential inherent in language itself. They write about refusing to forget or adapt to a world that only recognizes predefined categories. Their refusal to conform isn't seen as disruption for its own sake, but as a necessary rejection of harm.
They present this beautiful idea of language as not static, but as a living act, a space of relationship and choice.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is the emphasis on listening. Offering a name or pronoun is framed as an invitation to relationship. And the choice to accept or decline that invitation reveals the kind of world one chooses to build, moment by moment. It really highlights the active role we all play in shaping our linguistic landscape.
And there's this imagined confession from someone clinging to categories, afraid of what acknowledging other identities might unravel for them. That moment of imagining the fear behind the resistance. It really makes you think about the vulnerability involved in changing your worldview, even if it causes harm.
Yes, it's a powerful moment of empathy, isn't it? Imagining the fear behind the resistance, the fear that one's inherited understanding of truth and identity might be challenged or even crumble. But Dr. Hoerricks expresses a readiness for that change, having already experienced their own kind of undoing and seeing the potential for a new beginning.
This leads to the concept of neuroqueering, which seems central to Dr. Hoerricks' argument. So how do we push back against these deeply rooted systems? Dr. Hoerricks offers this compelling idea, neuroqueering, a deliberate rewiring, maybe, of our understanding of language and identity, a refusal to be confined by outdated scripts. Can you explain what they mean by that a bit more tangibly?
Well, imagine our understanding of gender as like a computer program with outdated code. Neuroqueering, as I understand it from the essay, is like intentionally rewriting that code, creating a more flexible and inclusive system within ourselves and how we use language.
Hacking the system, kind of?
Sort of. It's about actively cultivating a different kind of truth, one rooted in connection, in emergence, in language that evolves with us, rather than language that boxes us in. It emphasizes the cultivation of a different kind of truth, rooted in relation and emergent language.
So the final takeaway from Dr. Hoerricks is that refusing to use correct names and pronouns isn't a neutral act at all. It's actually a theological stance, a belief system that they personally choose not to subscribe to.
Exactly. It's a powerful conclusion that reframes the act of misgendering not as just an oversight or ignorance, but as an active participation in a particular, often unexamined worldview.
So, to bring it all together, our deep dive into Dr. Hoerricks' essay shows us that the refusal to use someone's correct name and pronouns is often not just a mistake, not just a slip-up.
Right.
It's frequently a reflection of much deeper beliefs about gender, about control, and even, surprisingly, about underlying theological frameworks. So the next time you witness or maybe experience the refusal to use correct pronouns, remember it's often not just ignorance, but potentially a deeply held belief system with these surprising historical and even theological roots.
What's so crucial to remember is the real harm caused by misgendering, not just on an individual level with those immediate somatic and emotional responses we talked about.
That tightening jaw, the feeling of rupture.
Exactly, but also on a systemic level, perpetuating a world that doesn't fully recognize the validity of diverse identities. Understanding the somatics of erasure, that physical impact, can give us a deeper empathy for the very real pain these actions cause.
That leaves us with a final thought for you, our listeners. Consider how language itself shapes our understanding of identity. What might it mean to actively participate in creating a more inclusive and relational linguistic landscape? Maybe take a moment to reflect on your own mental schema, as Dr. Hoerricks might put it, and your own openness to evolving understandings of gender and identity. What does that tell us about the power of language to both confine and maybe liberate?
Good question to sit with.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.